Welcome to another boring ass gameplay channel. So, let's get started. A young man joined the army and signed up with the paratroopers. He went through the standard training, completed the practice jumps from higher and higher structures, and finally went to take his first jump from an airplane. The next day, he called home to his father to tell him the news. "So, did you jump?" the father asked. "Well, let me tell you what happened. We got up in the plane, and the sergeant opened up the door and asked for volunteers. About a dozen men got up and just walked out of the plane." "Is that when you jumped?" asked the father. Not yet. Then the sergeant started to grab the other men one at a time and throw them out the door." "Did you jump then?" asked the father. "I'm getting to that. Everyone else had jumped, and I was the last man left on the plane. I told the sergeant that I was too scared to jump. He told me to get off the plane or he'd kick my fucking ass." "So, did you jump?" "Not then. He tried to push me out of the plane, but I grabbed onto the door and refused to go. Finally he called over the jump master. The jump master is this great big ass hairy guy, about 6'5" and 250 pounds. He said to me, "Boy, are you gonna jump or not?" I said, "No sir, I'm too scared." So the jump master unzipped his pants and pulled his pecker out. I swear, it was about 10 inches long and as big around as an AMX-13's turret. He said, "Boy, either you jump out that door, or I'm sticking this baby up where the sun doesn't shine." "So, did you jump?" asked the father. "Well, a little, at first." "Oh, sounds like he had his private pile pushed in. Let's move on." A soldier ran up to a nun. Out of breath he asked, "Please, may I hide under your skirt? I'll explain later." The nun agreed. A moment later 2 military police ran up and asked, "Sister, have you seen a soldier running around here?" The nun replied, "He went that way." After the MPs ran off, the soldier crawled out from under her skirt and said, "I can't thank you enough, sister. You see, I don't want to go to Syria." The nun replied, "I understand completely." The soldier added, "I hope I'm not rude, but you do have a great pair of legs." The nun replied, "If you had looked a little higher, you would have seen a great pair of balls too. I don't want to go to Syria either." And here we have the War Thunder Survival Guide. Pay attention. Aim towards the enemy. When the pin is pulled, Mr. Grenade is not our friend. Cluster bombing from B-52s is very, very accurate. The bombs are guaranteed to always hit the ground. If the enemy is in range, so are you. A slipping gear could let your M203 grenade launcher fire when you least expect it. That would make you quite unpopular in what's left of your unit. It is generally inadvisable to eject directly over the area you just bombed. Try to look unimportant. They may be low on ammo. Tracers work both ways. 5-second fuses only last 3 seconds. Bravery is being the only one who knows you're afraid. If your attack is going too well, you're probably walking into a fucking ambush. No combat ready unit has ever passed inspection. Any ship can be a minesweeper, once. Never tell the platoon sergeant you have nothing to do. Don't draw fire, it irritates the people around you. If you see a bomb technician running, try to keep up with him. An American soldier, serving in World War II, had just returned from several weeks of intense action on the German front lines. He had finally been granted R&R and was on a train bound for London. The train was very crowded, so the soldier walked the length of the train, looking for an empty seat. The only unoccupied seat was directly adjacent to a well-dressed middle-aged lady and was being used by her little mutt dog. The war-weary soldier asked, "Please, Mom, may I sit in that seat?" The English woman looked down her nose at the soldier, sniffed and said, "You Americans, you are such a rude class of people. Can't you see my little Fifi is using that seat?" The soldier walked away, determined to find a place to rest, but after another trip down to the end of the train, found himself again facing the woman with the dog. Again he asked, "Please, lady, may I sit there? I'm very tired." The English woman wrinkled her nose and snorted, "You Americans. Not only are you rude, you are also arrogant." The soldier didn't say anything else. He leaned over, picked up the little mutt and tossed it out the window and sat down. The woman shrieked and railed. and demanded that someone defend her. An English gentleman sitting across the aisle spoke up. "You know, sir, you Americans do seem to have a penchant for doing the wrong thing. You eat holding the fork in the wrong hand. You drive your cars on the wrong side of the road. And now, sir, you've thrown the wrong bitch out the window." Two good old boys, Bubba and Junior, get promoted from privates to sergeants. Not long after, they're out for a walk and Bubba says, "Hey, Junior, there's the NCO club. Let's you and me stop in and have us a drink." "But we's privates," protests Junior. "No, we's sergeants now," says Bubba, pulling him inside. "Now, Junior, I am gonna sit down and have me a drink, but we's privates," says Junior. "You blind boy," says Bubba, pointing at his stripes. "We sergeants now," so they order their drinks and pretty soon a hooker comes up to Bubba. "You're cute," she says, "and I'd like to take you someplace and make you feel real good, but I've got a bad case of the gonorrhea." Bubba pulls his friend to the side and whispers, "Junior, go look in the dictionary and see what that there gonorrhea means. If it's good, give me the okay sign." Junior goes to look it up, comes back, and gives Bubba the big okay sign. 3 weeks later, Bubba is laid up in the infirmary with a terrible case of gonorrhea. "Junior," he says, "what you give me the okay for?" "Well, Bubba, in the dictionary, it says gonorrhea only affects the privates." Then he pointed to his stripes and says, "And we sergeants now." "Okay, that was a stupid joke, let's try again." A young punk gets on the crosstown bus and sits down in the only vacant seat, directly across from an old man. The young punk has spiked, multicolored, green, purple, and orange hair. His clothing is a tattered mix of leather rags. His legs are bare and he's without shoes. His entire face and body are riddled with piercings, jewelry, and his earrings are big, bright, red, yellow and green feathers. The old man glares at the young punk for him for the next 10 miles as the bus travels across the city. Finally, the punk looks across at the old man and yells, "What the fuck are you looking at, old man? Like you never did anything wild when you were young?" Without missing a beat, the old man replies, "Yeah. Back when I was very young and in the Navy, I got really drunk in Singapore and had sex with a parrot. I thought you might be my son." One day a sadistic drill sergeant was putting his platoon through several of the worst and most humiliating tasks he could think of, including cleaning his personal washroom. After one final use of the toilet which had been clogged for 2 days. And at the end of the day, after he ran each one of them into the ground, he called attention and walked the line. Stepping forward, the drill sergeant pushed his face right up to the youngest looking private and groused, "I'll bet you're wishing that I would die so you could come and piss on my grave." With a straight face, the private replied, "Sir, no sir, when I get out of the army, I'm never gonna stand in another line again." Going to war with the army that we want. President Trump announced yesterday that he will mobilize selected units of the Salvation Army in order to boost troop levels in Syria. The designated units, the 15th Strip Mall Patrol and the 17th Kmart Brigade, will receive 8 weeks of intensive training prior to being deployed. The Salvation Army has a proud history of serving pastries and hot coffee to battlefield troops since World War I, said the president. But desperate measures call for desperate times and vice versa. Therefore, I have authorized the establishment of Operation Cattle Corps, a program that will train members of the Salvation Army for combat duty. At a brief question and answer session following this announcement, CNN's Wolf Blitzer asked the president whether Operation Cattle Corps amounted to a backdoor draft. "No," said Trump. "These units are already in the army, aren't they?" Embattled Secretary of Defense was taking time out from handwriting letters of condolence to the families of soldiers killed recently in Syria, praised the decision to mobilize the Salvation Army. "Do I think this is a good idea?" jabbing the air with his calligraphy pen for emphasis. "Of course I do. It's about time we went to war with the army that we want. If ever there was an army with God on its side, the Salvation Army is it. Besides, we undermine troop morale if some members of the army are getting their guts shot out while others are standing around asking, decaf or regular." John Larson, the Salvation Army's general, also endorsed the mobilization. Larson spoke with reporters on Kettle Force One, his army's private jet, while on his way to South Asia. The first contingent of Operation Cattle Corps troops are scheduled to arrive at Fort Benning, Georgia, on the 15th of January. After they have been trained and sent to Syria, Salvation Army members currently serving pastries and coffee to troops will return to the United States for military training. Their duties in Syria will be assumed by members of Arnie's Army, a private non-combat force maintained by golfer Arnold Palmer. In related news, Tiger Woods said that his army was not up to fighting right now, as we've been in a slump recently. Woods said that as soon as his members had worked out the kinks in their bayonet swing, they would be ready for the majors.